like Pete, but I better change it. I would say anyway his name is Pete. And he woke up one morning and he was very distressed, and he went out and he met the first person that he met. He said to them he was upset. And he was a man who had lived with his parents. You'll recognise him. He had lived with his parents all his life. His parents were gone, and he was the youngest son of the family. He had never married, and he had never bothered to take a job either. He said once that he could work any 3 days in the week, but he never specified which 3 days. And when the recession came, nobody wanted him to work for the 3 days anyway. So it suited him, so he just lived off the land. But he woke up this morning and he was upset anyway, and he went down, the first person he met, he said he was upset. And they said, "What's wrong with you?" And he said, "I dreamt last night that I died." And the man said, "Well, you didn't die, so you should be happy." And he said, "No, I'm very, very disappointed." He said, "I dreamt I died of nothing." What a waste. So that was sort of when he was going around the place. So he was mulling it over for a day or so anyway, and he was beginning to think, say, well, if I did die, what would have happened? Would there have been a wake? So of course there would have been an Irish wake. So he came up with a great idea. He'd have a wake for himself before he died, to see how it went. But he couldn't go down the road and say to people, "I'm having a wake for myself, will you come along," and all the rest of it, because I'm not going to die. So he decided he would die. And he went down and he told his special friend, his best special friend, that he had a problem, that he was going to die. He didn't want to talk about it, he didn't want anyone else to know about it, but that he was going to die, and would he be interested in coming out for a few drinks. There was only one slight problem, that he was broke, and he was pal, of course. What would you say if somebody came up to you and said that? "Don't worry about it, I'll pay for it, you'll be all right." So he did that with 6 other fellas as well. So the whole lot of them then turned up, there was 8 of them turned up, and the party started. And it went on all night and all day. And they repaired back to the first fella's house, and the party went on through the day and the night again. And it was into the second day and they were still partying along. And one of the pals was called Dermot, and he said, "Will a prayer do any good at all, do you think?" And the man says, "Well, it can't do any harm." They were after being put out of the pub at this stage because they were lashing into the green fields of Athenry yet again. Do you know that sort of way? I know it's the fields of Athenry, but they were singing the green fields of Athenry. It was a little bit of a different version they were singing. So they were out in the street, and Dermot says, "Will a prayer do any good at all?" So he said, "Well, it would." So they said a prayer that he might be happy, because each of them wasn't supposed to know. Do you know that sort of a way? They were all at a party, but you weren't supposed to know what she knew, and you weren't supposed to know what he knew. And it was going on and on and on. The next thing is a car pulls up, and Sandra gets out of it. Now, who was Sandra? Sandra's his fiancée. And Sandra was wondering, she had heard he was going on a journey, because this was the cover story. He was leaving, and it was a farewell party. So Sandra was distressed that she wasn't going or anything like that. So he said, "You can't come with me where I'm going, but all will be revealed to you later on." And they got into a different pub, and were going on for another little while. And Karen arrived. And Karen was his new fiancée, but she didn't know anything about Sandra being his old fiancée. So the two, a row and a ruction started then between the two of them. So the only thing he could do then was he called a taxi. And he put the 2 women into the taxi, and he sent them up to his house, and he said, "I'll be up in a few minutes, I just want to talk to the lads." So off went the 2 women, consoling one another at the death, at the passing, or the leaving of their good friend Peter. Well, he didn't follow them up, but he said goodbye to all of the lads. And he went down to Bus Rs, and he got a bus to Knock. And he wasn't in Knock 2 days, but it was a miracle. He was cured. So he came home and he knocked on all of the doors, and he said, "Lads, I'm cured. It's a miracle." And he settled down then, and no one would speak to him then for 6 months, because they weren't sure. They just weren't sure whether or not he was for real. Now that's a true story. I know you don't believe it, but it's a true story. I could show you the man tomorrow. I wasn't one of the 6 people. But one of the people who was one of the 6 people was a man called Lanky. He was called Lanky because he came from a family of people that were tall and slim. And Lanky was another man who was a child of this world. And he marched to the beat of a slightly different drummer, ever so slightly. He lived in Lucan, and on the Strawberry Beds, whether you know it or not, I don't know whether you know it or not, there's a pub called the Strawberry Hall. And it's about halfway between here and there, that sort of a place, do you know? And there's traditional music sessions in there. So Lanky used to go into the traditional sessions and he'd sit down. And he was one of these people, I'm sure you're at every session that ever was, that when the tune is over, he's able to tell you the real name of that tune and where it really came from. And he'd tell you if it was a tune that you thought you knew, of Walton's best 100 songs. Do you know that sort of way? He'd tell you, no, that's not it at all. The real story behind that is that's called The Cat That Sat Outside of Murphy's Door. And it comes from a little small town that's to the west of Mount Brandon, in the west end of Kerry. Now, if any of you know Kerry or know Mount Brandon or anything else, there's nothing to the west of Mount Brandon except America. But he said no. He's the sort of fella that could persuade you that, you know, anything was possible and all the rest of it. So he used to sit in with the musicians, but he never had anything with him. He never even brought a pair of spoons to keep time or anything else. He was just there. And they were talking to him and talking to him and talking to him, and he was talking away. And eventually one of the musicians said to him, as they do, will you play a tune yourself? He says, well, I don't have anything with me, but I will. I'll bring my instrument along with me next week and I'll play a tune for you. So now he used to get from Lucan to the Strawberry Hall. It's about maybe 2 or 3 miles if you know the road. But he used to get a lift off a pal of his on a Honda 50. And the two of them would wobble down the Strawberry Beds, happy enough, down they went. But the instrument of choice that he had was a piano accordion. So away they went down the Strawberry Beds with the piano accordion in the back of the passenger and they're going like this and all the rest of it down the way. So we went in and came time for him to play. Now I don't know whether you know any traditional musicians or not, but they can be fussy creatures. And I know that because a nephew of my own is an uilleann pipe player, and you know, that's okay. I love him because he's relative, that's it, you know. Anyway, they can be fussy people. And he sat in with them anyway, but when they saw him coming in with the piano accordion, they were a bit nervous about the whole thing because there's a pecking order and all the rest of it. It's said about Seamus Ennis, the great uilleann pipe player, that he didn't like bodhrán players. And he was asked by a young man who had bought a new bodhrán, what was the best way to play a bodhrán, Mr. Ennis? And Mr. Ennis said, the best way to play a bodhrán is with a penknife. And you just do it that way, you know. So it's much the same attitude they had to the box player when he came in and he sat down. So it came time for him to be asked to play, and he said, where are you going to play? And this is the man that knew the origins of every song that ever was played or was ever told. And he said, what are you going to play? He says, I'm going to play a tune, I only learned it now from a German backpacker called Hans. And he only learned it in the last few weeks. And I'm not entirely certain that I know all the words of it, but I'll play it for you anyway. So he started to play, and their interest was mighty when he started. And then sort of a horror fell over them, and a complete silence fell over them. Because what was he playing? Wooden Heart. Do you know Wooden Heart? Yes, yes. I'd sing it for you, only I can't sing. But he couldn't play Wooden Heart either, so we're a match. So when it was finished anyway, he was asked would he leave and not come back again, which was an unusual classical thing in a traditional music section. But he was asked to leave anyway, so he said, feck the whole lot of you, that's it. And so-and-so the begrudgers, and off he went home. So there was an open air set dancing started off near the river, because it was these community things where people go a bit mad, and instead of having set dancing in a fine place like this, they decided they'd have it in the open, because someone had read a book about dancing at crossroads and that sort of stuff, you know. So he went down there and he took part in that, and he said he used to dance before Michael Flatley ever heard tell of river dance, and he used to dance set dancing down by the river. But he danced on his own, and he called it individual set dancing. Do you know that sort of way? You know set dancing is 8 people with 2 sessions for crisscross and all the rest of it. So when he started dancing, he was still dancing to Wooden Heart, which was a kind of a slower beat. So whenever anyone was there, they were sort of missing. Do you know that way? And then when he was supposed to meet his partner, when she was going past too fast. So he reached out to catch her, and she was a smaller woman than him. And his hand connected with her neck, and he pushed her, do you know. So after that, shortly thereafter, he was asked to leave that again as well. So he took up karaoke singing. And the karaoke singing he was doing again, he was dancing to the beat of a slower lifting. So he decided he'd bring his own words along to the karaoke. So he was singing one song to the air of another one. But people asked him to leave that again, so he got fed up. So the current position is this. This is a real man, I'm not making this up now. This could be true. This man then decided he would go to England, like a good many men before him, Irish people before him. So he's now in England, practicing and training, for he's going in next year for the X Factor. He fully believes that he'll either win or be placed so high in it that he'll be able to make so much money that he'll be able to fund a new musical called Wooden Heart. He's going to dance the Michael Flatley part. Hans is going to be the musical director if you can ever find him. and the lad with the Honda 50 is going to be the promoter. So if he turns up next year, his name is Lanky, if he turns up next year on X Factor, please vote for him, and I'll tell you what happened the next year, the next time you come along. Thank you very much.